You're sitting in a room and it goes quiet, not gradually, suddenly. The hum of the city drops out, the podcast ends, whoever was talking in the next room stops talking, and before you've consciously registered any of this, your hand is already moving toward your phone. You don't decide to do it, it's already done. Most people who notice this habit assume it's a modern problem. Screen addiction, dopamine dependency, the smartphone destroying the ability to simply be still. Self-help books have been written about it. Retreats have been built around fixing it. Entire meditation industries exist because sitting in silence feels, to most people, deeply wrong. But here's what's fascinating. That instinct, the one that fires the moment a room goes quiet, is not a glitch in your modern wiring. It is one of the oldest survival reflexes in the human body. And it is working exactly as designed. The savanna that shaped Homo erectus was loud. Not aggressively loud, ambiently loud. Constantly, predictably loud. Insects, birds, wind through grass, the movement of small animals through undergrowth. This was the acoustic baseline of the African open landscape for millions of years, and your ancestors' nervous systems were calibrated to it the way a ship's gyroscope is calibrated to the horizon. You don't notice the baseline. You only notice when it changes. And on the open savanna, there was one thing that reliably changed it. Large predators don't announce themselves. They don't roar before they hunt. That's a territorial display, not a hunting behavior. What they do is move. And when they move through a landscape, everything else goes quiet. Birds stop calling, insects pause, small mammals freeze. The acoustic footprint of a predator is not a sound. It is an absence. The silence comes first. The predator comes second. For 2 million years, the hominids who survived were the ones whose nervous systems learned to read that gap, the ones who didn't need to see the lion to know it was there, the ones who felt the quiet and felt it wrong. Their descendants are sitting in rooms right now, reaching for their phones before they understand why, but here's the part nobody talks about. In 2008, ecologist Bernie Krause published the results of more than 4 decades of continuous acoustic field recording across 6 of the world's major biomes. Krause had spent his career mapping what he called soundscapes, the total acoustic signature of a living ecosystem. And what he found, buried inside thousands of hours of tape, was a pattern so consistent it became a diagnostic tool. Healthy ecosystems, Krause found, produce layered, continuous sound. Insects in one frequency range, birds in another. Wind and water occupying the space between. The frequencies don't compete. They interlock. The ecosystem, left intact, fills its own acoustic spectrum the way an orchestra fills a concert hall. When a predator enters the frame, the orchestra stops. Not every instrument, not all at once, but section by section, the way a wave of silence moves through a theater when something goes wrong on stage. Krause documented this effect hundreds of times. And then he documented something he hadn't expected. Human subjects brought into acoustic environments and exposed to sudden, unexplained silence showed the same physiological response every time. Cortisol spike, pupil dilation, elevated heart rate, before they had consciously registered that anything had changed. The body responds to silence before the brain does. This is not a metaphor for modern anxiety. This is the actual order of operations in the human threat detection system. The brainstem processes acoustic discontinuity in approximately 150 milliseconds, fast enough to trigger a physical response before the prefrontal cortex has had time to form a thought about what just happened. You feel wrong before you know why you feel wrong. Here's where it gets interesting. The conventional reading of noise-seeking behavior, the one you find in pop psychology, in wellness journalism, in every article about digital addiction, treats silence as the natural state, and noise as the intrusion. We've built an entire framework around this idea. Meditation retreats, sound baths, the cultural mythology of the quiet life as the examined life, the peaceful life, the life worth living. Silence, in this framework, is what you're trying to get back to. But that reading has the history exactly backwards. Silence was never the baseline. Silence was never safe. For the entirety of human evolutionary history, The 2.8 million years before electric light, before walled cities, before any built structure that could muffle the outside world, silence was information, specific, actionable, life or death information. The baseline was noise. The deviation was silence. And the deviation meant something was out there, waiting for you to stop paying attention. What happened after about 10,000 years ago, with the development of permanent settlement, then walled architecture, then eventually the indoor environments that physically blocked acoustic input from the outside world, is that the alarm system lost its data. The silence that an ancient human would have interpreted as predator near became the silence of a well-insulated room, which carries no threat. But the nervous system didn't get the update. It still runs the old code. Now here's the part that should sit with you. Acoustic ecology researchers studying this reflex in contemporary populations have noticed something that the digital addiction framework completely misses. The behavior isn't random. People don't just reach for noise, they reach for specific kinds of noise. Voices, conversation, the ambient chatter of another human presence, even a simulated one, even a podcast no one is actively listening to, even a TV left on in the next room. Not music, not white noise. Voices. The savanna was loud, but it wasn't loud with music. The most meaningful acoustic signal in that environment, the one that meant safety, that meant proximity to the group, that meant the predator had not cleared the area yet, was other humans talking. Homo erectus living in social bands of 20 to 50 individuals would have heard near-constant low-level human vocalization as the acoustic signature of being alive and not alone. Your brain isn't just trying to fill silence. It's trying to hear people. The podcast you put on while you cook, the show running in the background while you work, the phone call to no one in particular, these aren't symptoms of an attention disorder. They are your nervous system using available technology to reconstruct the acoustic environment it was built to require. The voices don't need to say anything meaningful. They just need to be there. A Pleistocene campfire circle of 20 people talking about nothing also contained very little meaningful information per speaker. That wasn't the point. The point was that the predator frequency acoustic band was occupied, which meant the predator wasn't. There's something worth noting about what this means for silence as a practice. The discomfort is not weakness. The urge to fill it is not failure. Every mindfulness tradition that has ever asked a human being to sit still and be quiet has been, at some level, asking that person to override a survival reflex that kept their great-great-ancestors alive on the African grassland. Not a bad habit. Not a symptom. A reflex. The fact that you can, with training, override it anyway. That you can learn to sit with silence and not respond, might say something interesting about what it means to be human. It's one of the only things we do that our evolutionary history did not prepare us for. In 2019, University of Virginia psychologist Timothy Wilson ran a study where subjects were asked to sit in a quiet room alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. They were told they could press a button at any time that would deliver a mild electric shock. 71% of the men in the study pressed the button. 25% of the women. Some pressed it more than once. People chose pain over silence. Actual, physical pain. When a room goes quiet and something in you tightens, when your hand moves before your mind does, that is not your phone addiction acting up. That is 2 million years of perfect memory, remembering something you have never personally experienced, from a place you have never been, in a body that still believes it is outside. The savanna is still listening. You just don't know what for anymore.